It's a presidential election season. Are your employees legally entitled to talk about politics at work? I'm Karen Michael. You're listening to The Job Judge. Welcome to The Job Judge, where we navigate through all those legal landmines and workplace dysfunction that I'm pretty sure is happening in your organization right now. I'm Karen Michael. I've been an employment lawyer for 31 years. I wrote the book, Stay Hired, How to Thrive and Survive in the 21st Century Workplace. I'm a former HR executive and professor, and I'm in your workplaces every single day doing investigations and training and giving work law advice. And one thing I know for sure, the state of the workplace isn't great. We have a lot of work to be done in our workplaces. Most of them are pretty messed up. Together, on our Job Judge podcast, we will create safe, civil, and legally compliant workplaces so that the workplace works for everyone, including you. Now, if you're a business owner, an executive, a manager, an HR professional, if you work, you don't want to miss an episode of The Job Judge, because I guarantee on one of these podcasts, we're going to talk about a situation happening right now in your organization. So be sure to like, subscribe, follow, comment so that you don't miss an episode and that other people can learn about the Job Judge podcast, because I bet they need this too. Now, I am an employment lawyer, but I'm not allowed to give legal advice here on the Job Judge podcast. So everything I'm talking about is just general guidance. It is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, seek out an attorney in your state. The other thing, some of the messaging that we have in the Job Judge can be triggering. So just understand we do talk about real situations and real cases. So just a little bit of a warning that we do talk about real stuff here at the Job Judge. In case you're in the car with your 5-year-old, you might want to wait to listen to the podcast until you're in a private location. So what about politics at work? We now, as of today, we know who the candidates are going to be for president, and people are pretty locked in, and they're also pretty emotional about their candidate or the candidates or politics. And never before have we been more divided than right now about how we feel about all of the issues around politics. So the question is, how is this going to impact the workplace? And I know in 2020, we had a bunch of discussions about that and how that would impact the workplace. And now it's already been 4 years and we're right back at it again. So our friends over at Resume Help did us a little favor. They did a survey earlier this year, actually just in February of 2024, about politics at work. And they asked 1,000 people how they felt about politics in the workplace. And yeah, it's kind of a small survey, but I do think it gives us a little insight into how our colleagues are feeling about politics and the workplace. 45% of respondents have regretted having political discussions at work, according to the survey by resumehelp.com. I can't imagine why, because you have a conversation about your candidate and the other person votes for the other candidate. And now, unfortunately, with this climate, you hate each other, because that's just the way we are these days. We can't accept, oh, you vote for that person? You're not a terrible person. You vote for that person? You're not a terrible. No. We make a determination that the other side is a terrible person. That's just how we are in today's society. And I guess that's fine if it's your relative or friend that you don't have to speak to again. But if it's your coworker, you need to come back and work together. And what's interesting about politics is there's no law that protects discussions of politics, meaning if I assert my political view and I am discriminated against or retaliated for that political view, there is no law that says I have a cause of action for that, except some states state that you have a right to not be harassed or discriminated against based on your political views. And some employers have policies that state you have a right to not be harassed or discriminated against or retaliated against based on your political views. But that's really state by state or employer by employer. There's certainly no federal right that says you have a right to discuss politics in the workplace. So because of that, you need to be kind of careful about the things you discuss, knowing that that could cause division with you and your peers. I do a lot of workplace civility training, and I have a list of what I call the never evers, meaning don't ever do these things because if you do, you're going to get fired. And then I have a list of what I call the maybes. Some people call it the slow. Some people call it the yellow light. It's the caution. It's the maybe list because it could lead to a misunderstanding or divisiveness. So tread lightly because it might not be worth it. And I've had cases where politics has caused so much divisiveness, it has led to what would be harassment if it was something actionable. Now, harassment based on politics probably violates your civility code. Hopefully, if you have a code of conduct, maybe it would violate a policy like that in your organization. But in general, there's no legal right to talk about politics. But the other question is, what is politics? There was a recent case from the National Labor Relations Board that said that an employee wearing a Black Lives Matter symbols, that was protected activity under the National Labor Relations Act. And the theory is if you engage in mutual aid in concerted activity for mutual aid and protection, and he said he was wearing Black Lives Matter to support his colleagues who he felt were being harmed because of their race, undermined, discriminated against because of their race, that would be considered concerted activity for mutual aid and protection. Under federal law, employees under the Hatch Act, federal employees under the Hatch Act really should not be discussing politics in their workplace. But similar to this Black Lives Matter issue, the federal government determined that Black Lives Matter movement was not political, so it did not fall under the Hatch Act. So you have to think about, number one, what even is politics that could cause this divisiveness, what's protected and what isn't. And it does create these conversations about anything that could be a controversial topic that could polarize people. Can those conversations lead to more divisiveness? Especially we've got how many more months left until the election? The 45% who regretted having political discussions at work, even for those who aren't living with regrets of past conversations, it states political talks in the workplace can be dicey. 51%, according to the survey, believe that discussing politics at work negatively impacts the overall work environment. And 24% think the upcoming U.S. presidential election will make their workplace more uncomfortable. Do we need anything else? I mean, don't we have enough things in our workplace that's causing incivility and divisiveness? We need one more thing for the rest of 2024? Maybe we could make a decision that we're not going to bring that level of divisiveness into our organizations, that we're not going to create an environment where other employees feel uncomfortable. And then on the flip side, maybe we can make a decision that if you find out somebody is politically different than you, that you're just going to accept that person, that they've made that decision and move on. We're not going to put all of these decisions, theories on that person about that they're a bad person and they believe this and they believe, and we're going to label them. Because that's how we can create civil workplaces. According to the survey, politics can have a negative impact on hiring. A company's politics can influence the types of candidates who apply for its open roles. In fact, according to the survey, nearly a quarter of those surveyed indicated that they have decided against applying for a job because of the political stance of the company. 23% said they decided not to apply to a company's job listing because of the company's political stance. 10% of people have chosen not to apply for a job because of a company's politics on more than one occasion. So organizations, you have to decide. If you feel so strongly about something that you want to stand by something, then you do that. But just understand there could be consequences to that, including in the hiring of employees. Retention, according to the survey, can also be impacted by political conversations. The data showed, according to the survey, that bosses and politics don't mix. Political discussions in the workplace can create an undesirable climate for some workers, especially when it comes from the top. And it can lead to resignations. According to the data, 37% of workers know their current boss's political affiliation. I remember I was doing that training that I told you about, the civility training, and I put up the slide that lists all the maybes. And when I put up the part about the politics, is one of the maybes, one of the examples, this guy in the audience said, "That's me." And everyone said, "Yep, that's Joe." He's very vocal about his politics. And maybe that's fine, except Joe is the CEO. And so clearly people thought that if they didn't align with Joe's politics, even if they didn't agree with it, then their job was going to be impacted in some way. If you are a leader, think twice about whether it is a good idea to either be out there on social media promoting whatever politics, divisiveness you feel like you need to, or whether it's a good idea internally for your employees to know what your politics are, to be touting your politics to other people, because it could undermine you as a leader and also create a divisiveness on your team that is unnecessary. 59% of people believe that their manager's political beliefs influence their management style or decisions, and 25% have either left a job or wanted to leave a job because of their boss's political beliefs. 25%, a quarter of the people, said they don't want to work for you because of your political belief. 13% have left one or more jobs because of their boss's political beliefs, and 12% have wanted to leave their job for the same reason. Now, they claim that political discussions in this survey negatively impact women. You know, I'm always cautious about something like that. I think it just impacts people generally in the workplace. Here's how we should be thinking about this politics issue. If you work for a private sector employer, understand that this concept of the First Amendment, well, I have a First Amendment right to say anything I want. It doesn't apply. Now, some states have free speech rights. Like I think Connecticut's got a free speech law, state law, but that's not unfettered. You can't just say anything you want. There's certain limits to that speech in the workplace. So if you work for a private sector employer, understand that you can't just say anything you want whenever you want. And even if you work for a public sector workplace, a municipality or a state, the rule on the First Amendment goes like this. Are you speaking on a matter of public concern? Are you speaking as a citizen, not as an employee? And even if all that's true, do the interests of the organization in running efficient operations outweigh the First Amendment right? And if the conversation is divisive, causing acrimony and problems in the workplace, then there's going to be a problem. So think as this election season starts, should we have some rules around what kind of conversations we should be having in our workplace? And should we do our own self-monitoring to determine that maybe it's not a good idea to bring that into the workplace? Don't be that person that always brings that kind of political discussion. Everything turns to a political discussion. And then if you are faced with an employee in your workplace, a colleague that has a different politics to you, just move on. Stay civil. It's all going to be okay. Everybody is a good person. Don't assume that they're a bad person. We're going to be okay. Now, every week on our podcast, we answer a listener's email, or I go on Reddit or somewhere and I find something that somebody's posted on social media. And I actually have an email from a listener who wrote this. The age-old question, this is an HR professional, the age-old situation when a manager wants to fire someone now but has zero documentation, or worse, a flattering or positive recent performance review or nomination for something like Employee of the Month. How do we encourage managers to do the documentation in the moment? I tell them I don't care if the notes are on the form. As long as the details are there, it still doesn't happen. You know that movie Groundhog Day? This is literally my Groundhog Day, where the same day happens day after day after day. Constantly, an employer will call me, "Karen, we want to fire Fred. He's been a terrible employee for 2 years, and now we want to fire him. Do you have any documentation?" "Nope, but we've been documenting it. We've been talking about it, and now we're ready to fire him." And then some people will say, "Yeah, we have documentation we've kept in the file, but we haven't had a conversation with Fred." Understand the importance of documentation. Documentation isn't just for your own benefit in the back files. It's for the employee's benefit, so that the employee knows what they're doing in the moment is not helping them to be successful. And the purpose of documentation isn't to document all the bad things that employee has done. It's to document that you had a conversation with that employee about the concerns that you have, about the things that are happening. And yes, employees many times don't see that as a gift. They don't see that as you care enough about me to let me know what's happening right now isn't helping me to be successful. And that's okay. It's okay that employees don't see it like that. Hopefully you've built trust with your employees, so when you do have that conversation, they accept it and understand it's coming from a place of, I want you to be successful. But all the time, years of outstanding performance reviews. Because in my experience, managers, sometimes you're too nice. You don't want to have those conversations with employees. You don't like that, what you would consider to be confrontation. Reframe your thought process. As soon as you go, that's weird. Fred didn't turn in his work. That's odd. Sally's late again. It's been 3 times. As soon as you do that, start those conversations. Document those conversations. Everything isn't a final warning. And if we could just start early, that's where the magic happens. Those early conversations that have to be documented. And you're documenting the conversation, not just the problem. And you're sharing that documentation with the employee. If the employee wants to know what's in their file, why wouldn't you want to show that to them? You might not legally be required to do it, but was there a big secret about concerns we have about an employee's performance? This problem that this HR person has written to me about is just dated every single day, all day. And it's something that's easily remedied. So right now, managers, if you're listening to this podcast and you've got an employee situation that you need to address, I tell managers, give yourself 48 hours. And within 48 hours of when you go, that's weird, so-and-so did X, you're going to do something to address that issue. Either a conversation that you send a follow-up email, whether it's a written counseling memo, whether it's a written warning, whether it's a final warning, whatever it is, do something and make sure it's documented. Now, we drop one of these Job Judge podcasts every single week. You don't want to miss an episode. Be sure to follow, like, subscribe, comment, so you don't miss an episode. I'm Karen Michael, and you've been listening to The Job Judge.